Nestled along the banks of the Ohio River in the quiet beauty of Wayne County lies a town with a story as enduring as the hills that surround it, the town of Cerrito, West Virginia. Founded in 1857 with a vision of unity, progress, and freedom, Cerrito was more than just a settlement. It was a bold social experiment, carried forward by generations of proud, hardworking people. Through the decades, Cerrito has witnessed the tides of history, from early days of the Underground Railroad to the growth of the coal industry's boom to the quiet resilience of small-town life today. Each chapter has left its mark, not just in records and photographs, but in the spirit of its community. In this special interview, we sit down with local voices, storytellers, historians, and lifelong residents to explore the rich tapestry of Cerrito's past. We'll uncover the moments that shaped the town, the people who stood at its heart, and the legacy that continues to guide it forward. Join us now as we journey through time and memory, celebrating the proud heritage of Cerrito, West Virginia, a town built on purpose, preserved by pride, and remembered through stories.
Welcome to this episode of Wondering About Cerrito Canova. In this episode, we'll talk primarily about Cerrito Canova football. And joining us as a very special guest today is a person whose name is at the forefront of any discussion about Cerrito Canova football, Mr. David Lucas. Dave was a 1966 graduate of CK and went on to play at Marshall University and get into the coaching profession himself, and is a member, David, I think I'm correct, you're in the Ohio High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame, is that right?
I am.
Coached many years at Coal Grove, Ohio. So Dave, thanks for joining us today and taking part in what we hope is going to be an entertaining project for
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Dave, back when you were younger, they didn't have youth football programs like we have today. How did you get interested in football?
Playing sandlot football, and it was something that kind of fell natural to me. I didn't have any problems with the game, and I kind of liked physical contact, so that set me up for the game.
And you had an older brother, Raymond, who was also a star athlete at CK. I'm sure that helped a little, following in his footsteps.
Well, he's the one that got me organized.
Yeah.
When he got involved in football, our dad wasn't going to let us play, and our mom signed the papers, and of course I followed Raymond all around. And by the time we got to organized football, I was playing 2 or 3 years above myself. I was playing with Raymond. Of course, he was 3 years older than me, so we were. He got me started, and I just really kind of fell in the game.
Yeah. When was the first organized football that you played? Would it have been junior high or?
No, I started out with George Bocook.
Claude Cox.
Claude Cox. Those two guys got us started. Had a little league program, and I think they just picked up anybody off the sideline that wanted to play, and I got in with him, and they got me started, and I really enjoyed playing the game, and from then on I was kind of hooked on the game.
I don't remember exactly what grade you would have been in when Coach Ward first came to CK. Do you recall that?
Oh, I remember it well. Yeah, I was sitting on the steps over by the old gym, and Coach Ward pulled in. I was going into the 7th grade. It was 1960, and when he pulled in, I walked up and I said, "Coach, I want to play football." And I said, "I want to play on the 9th grade team." And he said, "Well, what grade you in?" I said, "I'll be in the 7th." He said, "Well, I'll have to see." And they gave me a uniform, so from then on, I started playing then, and by the time I got to the 9th grade, I was starting on the varsity.
So once Coach Ward got that first look at you in the uniform, he decided he would go ahead and let you play, and you didn't look back.
No, and I really started playing with all the guys I'd played with the whole time. I was just a couple years younger than them.
So the 1962 season was your first varsity season,
Well, let's see, 65, 64, 63. Yep, 62.
and 62 was the year that CK finished 9-1,
Yeah.
the one loss to Wayne.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate because we scored that touchdown. They didn't give it to us. And everybody says, well, how do you know? I said, because I was playing left tackle and I was across the goal line and Larry was on top of me. So he was across the goal line and then they pushed us back and they didn't give it to us.
Yeah, so our viewers will know. Would you describe that game a little bit for us, or that play in particular?
Yes, it was a play coming off of 27, coming off a left tackle, and it just Wayne had a really good team that year. They had to stay on there with us because we'd beaten everybody pretty soundly, and it got down right to the end of the game, and he gave it to us, and I really knocked the guy. It was on me. I knocked him backwards, and of course we were on the 1 or 2 yard line. And of course I talked to Coach Ward about it several times after that, and he said the bad thing about it is that we could have got a first down, and they didn't even measure it.
Yeah, as I recall, the ball was maybe on the 1 or the 2, but there was still space for a first down
There was
before the
still
goal
space
line.
for a first down, right?
And that kept you from going to the state championship game that
Knocked
season.
us out of the state championship game. Yeah, really felt bad for Coach Ward because he'd done a great job with that. And of course, I always enjoyed playing with Coach Ward. He'd get after you pretty good, but I kind of enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. Well, that 62 team, you had Larry Canterbury on that team.
Larry was Raymond was the fullback, and Larry Canterbury was the tailback. Earl was the quarterback, and that was a good football team. And we had good players all the way across, but we were playing some young guys too. Though I think there was five of us that were freshmen, and two of us were playing. Dave Ferguson was playing, and I was playing, and of course that kind of set the stage for the next 3 years.
Well, you mentioned Dave Ferguson, and the names of Lucas and Ferguson are synonymous with CK football. You hardly ever hear one that you don't hear the other. When did you first meet Dave Ferguson?
That was an interesting thing. I was a pretty good football player when I was young, and there was nobody around me really that could challenge me until one day Ferguson walked in, and he and I collided, and from then on it was me and him battling each other all the way through, and it was actually we lived together when we were at Marshall. We played together up there, so it was something that was special for me because it challenged me. He was such a really good football player and physical, and that's what I needed to be good. And he and I've talked about it before. It ended up making us both better.
Yeah. So, but the time the '63 season rolled around, you're coming off that 9-1 on the cusp of a state championship berth. Did you know going into '63, David, that you were going to have another pretty nice team?
I never really thought about team. I was just trying to worry about myself and be as good as I could be. And of course, we lost our first 2 games that year, and I remember thinking, this is not good. And all of a sudden, we started clicking, and once we got going, ended up being a really good football team down at the end. And I've always said that Coach Ward had so many great drives to score, but the best drive he ever made was when I was a sophomore against Hinton. The last drive, we took the ball the length of the field and scored and beat a team that was probably better than us talent-wise, and it was all Coach Ward.
And that was in the state championship.
That was in
game.
the state championship game. Yeah, we drove the ball down, and Gary Lanham was the fullback, and Gary was one of those guys that he just kind of sat back and didn't say a whole lot. And we told him, I said, Gary, those guys can't stop you. And he said, you don't think they can? I said, I know they can't. And they started giving him the ball, and we went the length of the field, and right at the end of the game, he took it across the goal line, beat them, I think, 19-13.
You mentioned Gary Lanham, and that's interesting. On a previous episode of Wondering About Cerrito Canova, we had a guest who said that one time after he scored a touchdown, Gary Lanham did either a front flip or a back flip.
That was the game.
That was the
the
Hinton
score. That was the score. Yeah.
That's, I think to any of us who can remember Gary Lanham, it's hard to believe as big as he was that he could do that.
Yeah. He was a talented guy. You know, like I said, he never said very much, but he was a force when he wanted to be.
The first two games that 1963 season, David, who beat you?
The first game was Huntington East, and the second game was Russell. And of course, you know, two bigger schools.
Yeah.
You know, and they were both real close games. And so help me, I believe that in the Huntington East game, I think Bob Lemley was the quarterback, and I hit him right at the end of the game and knocked the ball out, and their tailback caught it and scored. And I thought, oh no, and that's how they beat us.
Not a good omen.
No, that was right at the end of the game, and that's how they beat us.
On that 63 team, one of the Frazier twins played quarterback, is that right?
Yeah, Jim was the quarterback.
And John played halfback?
Yeah, John was the halfback. Yeah.
Who were the other kind of premier players on that team?
Well, it was a solid team. Our center was Danny. He was a sophomore. I was the right guard, and Jim Porter and Pete Dean alternated at the left guard, and Dave Seitz was the right tackle, and Hank was the right end, and the left tackle, I think Ferg was the left tackle. Instead of guard, he was playing tackle when we were sophomores, and Jim Burke was the end, and of course it's Jim and John and Gary.
Well, that's a pretty talented bunch of athletes.
It was, but it was a strong team, probably more than great athletes at that time, having so many young kids in there, but it ended up being really solid as far as the team goes. And on defense, I remember Tommy Dale intercepted a pass and scored, was one of our touchdowns, and of course Tommy was a sophomore too at that time.
Of course, you wouldn't at the time have recognized it that would start. That first state championship would be called the golden era of CK football.
Springboard.
Yeah. So you came back in 1964 off that state championship.
Should have won that.
With a team that many people say was as good as the 63 or 65 teams.
Well, you compare those teams in the 64 team, the backfield was so fast. We had Barry Scraggs was the fullback, and Bob Rutherford was the tailback, and those guys could run. I mean, they were fast. On the 65 team, we were a little bigger, a little stronger, and maybe not quite as fast, but when you balance it out, they were very close. But the 64 team would have been the state champion had we gotten in.
Yeah. Now that was the year that Barry Scraggs moved back here to
Barry was the
play
fullback,
football, right?
Yeah.
And Barry went on to play at Marshall.
Right.
He was a quite talented athlete, and so Mike Smith was on that team and didn't play a whole lot.
No, he didn't. He didn't play a whole lot that year. It was 65 was when he started playing. And of course, 66 he excelled.
Yeah. So you had a good enough team that a guy like Smith, who was one of the better athletes I think any of us ever watched, was not in the lineup, although he was a sophomore. But
we didn't really know what we had in Mike. You know, he was just a really good athlete that, you know, he kind of blended in with us and gave us, you know, what we needed. He was a guy that could get first downs and help move the ball, but he wasn't. Tommy Dale was the primary ball carrier on that team. I think he led the state in scoring at fullback. That's kind of unusual.
It is unusual. So, in '64, Who did we lose to that year?
Huntington East. Huntington, first game of the year.
Yeah, David, from your, of course, you had a long relationship with Coach Ward and Coach Craycraft, and through both as a player and as a coach for many years. Did you ever discuss with them why he kept scheduling Huntington East every year, knowing they were a bigger school?
I don't think Coach Ward evaluated who the bigger school was. I think he evaluated how good his team was going to be, and that was a good challenge for us every year. We knew Huntington East was going to be good every year, but as far as scheduling those people, I think Coach Ward just looked up and said, you have to have so many points to get into playoffs. Huntington East was a AAA school, and that gave us a better chance if we beat them. We're probably going to be in.
And that was always a very close game. That they won some and we won some, but even though they were bigger, Coach Ward certainly didn't dodge the competition.
No, he did. He didn't. In fact, he tried when we were seniors. I remember, he mentioned to me that he tried to schedule every team in West Virginia. Tried to schedule all the big AAAs. The only one that was scheduled was St. Albans. They were the only team that would schedule us in that season, because I think everybody knew what we had coming back.
Yeah, having watched that '64 group and knowing that most of you were coming back.
We had almost the whole team coming back. Yeah.
So when '65 season came along, you had, I guess you and Dave Ferguson had moved to guard by that time.
Ferguson moved to guard, yeah.
And Danny Shannon was still at center.
Right.
And
Don West was the right tackle. Don was a junior, and Hank, of course, was the right end, and the left tackle was Bill Cottle. That was an interesting thing. We had Jimmy McCoy, but for some reason Jimmy had to stop playing that year, and Bill Cottle was backup fullback. And I remember Coach Craycraft saying, "Who are you going to put at that left tackle?" And Coach Ward says, "I'm going to put Cottle in there." And he said, "Oh, no." You know how Coach would throw his hands up and say, "Oh, no, you can't put him in there. He runs to the sideline when he gets the ball." I remember I was happened to be standing there, and Coach Ward said, "Well, he'll be afraid enough of Lucas and Ferguson that he'll do his job." And boy, he did. He was really good. Never once did I get cut off. Of course, I pulled and went in his direction, and not once did I ever get cut off by the man that was on him. I got by him every time.
You had Bobby Crabtree at
Bobby was
end.
the left end. Yeah, yeah.
And in the backfield, Mike Watts.
Mike was the quarterback. Tommy Dell was the fullback. Mike Watts was the right. Mike Smith was the right half, and Ray Eggins. Mike must have been the left half because I pulled for Ray. Yeah. Ray must have been the right half. So that's the way it was.
Well, in any discussion about CK football, the '65 team is generally held as probably the best team produced during that 1960s period down there.
I don't know. There was the 1967 group was a really good group too.
67 was a nice team.
Those kids were sophomores when we were seniors, and I knew they were going to be good because those kids were tough. Yeah. They had to be tough. When they went up against us, they had to be pretty tough. And I knew they were going to be pretty good. Of course, they had some really good running backs. Had I think Murphy and Gibson, and those guys were really good players.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in the '65 regular season, you were undefeated. Is that correct?
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, you had scheduled AAA school, St. Albans.
Right.
Well, was that the last game of the regular season?
No, that was, let's see, it was next to the last game, I think. And I think we played Chapmanville after we played them. And, of course, the St. Albans game was a really good game. They had a good team. They were ranked in the top 5 in AAA. And we had a pretty nice game in that game. We drove the ball all the way down the 1 yard line, and we dropped the ball, and the guy picked it up and ran it all the way back for a touchdown. And it was Coach Ward always laughed. He said because when their tackle got it, he said we didn't have anybody could catch him.
Well, that was a game played at St. Albans on a Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon, right?
And David, there was one play in that game where you tackled a running back from St. Albans who, and I don't recall the name, but I recall he was pretty well respected as a tailback, and that ended his day for all practical purposes.
I was trying to remember his name too. It started with an A, but I can't remember. Exactly what it was.
Well, my memory is when you tackled him kind of in the open field, and he went to the sideline, and he was not of much effect after that.
Yeah, I was lucky. I got a few shots like that through the course of the game.
You seem to get a few shots like that through about every game, David. You were an exceptional player. Now, off that '65 team, you had you and David Ferguson, Bob Crabtree,
Hank.
Hank Stark, but you and Fergie and Crabtree that went on to play at Marshall. Of course, from the year before, Barry Scragg was there, and the
Right.
year after, Mike Smith was there.
Right.
So at one
Yeah.
time, we had 5 players from.
Right. It was a very unfortunate situation. I was really disappointed playing for Marshall because of the way the system was set up at that point. Charlie Schneider recruited us, and I liked Charlie as a coach. He was a good football coach, and we didn't have a whole lot of talent on that team. It was unfortunate, but I didn't feel like that we had enough talent to compete on that level, and I knew we didn't want to win in when I saw what we had. But Ferg and I both started on offense, and Barry started some split end for us, and that team was just I don't know. You'd have to say we just didn't have enough talent to compete in that level.
Well, following your college career, or at the end of it, I can recall you came back down to CK as I guess to do your student teaching, or
I did my student teaching at CK.
and served as a graduate assistant coach down there for a year or two.
No,
At the end,
I did my student teaching down there, and the next year I went to Fairland as an assistant coach for Jim Mayo, and that was a really good experience. Coach Mayo was a really good football coach. Of course, he played at Vinson and was on 2 state championship teams for Vinson, and us going together. He was an offensive coach, and I kind of was a defensive-minded coach at that time, and he and I we kind of meshed together. I think we went 3-7-1 that first year, 3-6-1, and then the next year we were 9-1. So from then on, we won 4 conference championships in a row, and had a real good run. And then I had an opportunity to go to Cold Grove. Actually, I was going to go to Raceland, and Coach Heck, Larry Heck, was the superintendent there, and Larry had asked me to come down there, and I decided to go. And when I got a phone call from Cold Grove, Coach Red Duty, he was the superintendent, who was a really good football coach at Cold Grove, and he asked me to come down and talk to him. And I said, well, I'd already told Larry I was coming, and I went and asked Mary Ann. I said, you think I should talk to him? She said, I don't think it hurt anything. And when I got down there, and Coach Duty started talking about retirement and talk about all these different things that I hadn't really thought about. When you're just starting, you don't think about retirement. But I ended up going to Cold Grove and stayed there for the next 35 years.
found a home.
Yeah, it was very much like the CK community. It was football minded, and of course, as a football coach, that's what you're looking for. And Coach Ward turned CK into a football community, and Coach Duty had turned Cold Grove into a football community. So I kind of slid right in there and fell right in place.
Well, certainly, while you were at CK in that whole decade of the '60s, the community support for football here grew exponentially. It seemed every year, bigger crowds would be bigger, and
Well, when you look at CK, you look back through the years, and even when I was young, they had guys like Kenny Hay and Doug Graham, and they had these guys come through in front of us, and I remember thinking, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then those guys came back, and Charlie Akers and those guys came back, and they kind of pushed us to get better every year. And I always appreciated those guys coming around. Earl Samples he was always around, encouraging us to get better. And of course, Raymond was always behind me.
Yeah. Well, tell us how a guy who played guard ended up with number 86.
I don't know. They just passed them out, and I took it. And
You got what Bobo Keynes handed you, huh?
whatever they gave me was fine with me. I didn't really think about numbers or anything at that time. Of course, there wasn't any designated numbers at that time. That didn't start off, I don't think, for a couple years after I finished.
Yeah. On defense, what position did you play, David?
I was the inside linebacker, and if I had my choice of playing, it'd be linebacker.
Yeah. And who did you recall who played the other linebacker with you?
Ray Akins. Ray was the linebacker. Ferg was the nose guard, and if he didn't get him, I got him. But he got him a lot of times. He was an awfully good nose guard. He was very quick.
Yeah.
And let's see, the tackle, Danny Shannon was the right defensive tackle, and Bobby was the right defensive end. Hank was the left defensive end, that left defensive tackle. But of course, Tommy was in the secondary. Mike was in the secondary. Mike Watts was in the secondary. I can go back in time and remember those guys walking out there, just kind of falls right back in place.
Yeah, young and invincible.
Yeah.
So, when did you decide during your high school career, college career, that you wanted to go into coaching?
Never really thought about it. It was just something that, they came and asked me if I wanted to come and, play football. And I said, playing football, I'm coming. So I went to Marshall and, went in. When I graduated, I still didn't really know what I was going to do. And when I went down and did my student teaching with CK, I decided then that I'd really like to do that. And getting to start with a guy like Jim Mayo, who had his feet on the ground, was a Christian man and had a lot of the same values that I had growing up, and kind of fell right into place and gave me an opportunity to get my feet on the ground. And from that point on, coaching was something that came natural to me. Just working with young kids was something that I didn't realize I could do, but I really, really enjoyed working with kids.
Well, you mentioned earlier that the Coal Grove community was a lot like Cerrito and Canova, and would I be correct by saying that it was a kind of a blue collar community where people still supported their families, and Friday nights they supported their football? And
yeah, when I went to Coal Grove, it was a lot different than it is now. They had three large plants there, steel mills. Of course, you had Armco across the river, and there was a lot of good, solid jobs in that area. And when I left that area, when I decided to leave, all those places were closed. Everything had changed, and it's still, I think, trying to find a way to maintain its,
its identity now has changed around.
Yeah, it's different now because the parents don't all have good jobs like they did then, and the school's not near as big as it was then. There was it was a bigger school because of the plants in Ironton and Ashland, and now the school's a lot smaller than it was then. And of course, my son's the head coach there now, so he's having to adjust to different things than I did. And I told him, I said, don't judge me yourself by what I did, because it was a different environment then than it is now.
Well, that's an interesting point, Dave. Your son followed you into the coaching profession and now has the same job you held there at Coal Grove, and he's had a nice career there.
I was real lucky. Not very many parents get to do what I did with my youngest son. He was my defensive coordinator for 12 years, so I got to spend time with him that most parents don't get to do when your kids get up when they're grown. And I got to see sides of Jay that I didn't even know was there until I started coaching with him.
Yeah. Now you had two boys, is that correct?
Had two boys. Dave he is a vice president of AEP and lives in Columbus and has a good job, and he's a businessman.
Yeah.
That's not me. I'd rather coach, but he's talented at what he does, and
Yeah.
That's what you want your kids to do.
Certainly.
It's like Jay. He's talented in coaching. I've always said that he probably knows more about the game than I did then, because he has the benefit of myself, Coach Ward, Coach Craycraft. He grew up with all those people, so his views are pretty similar to what ours was at that time.
Yeah, Dave. Anytime there's a gathering of old football players from down here, the topic always comes up of the wing tee. Would the wing tee work today?
Well, that's interesting, because I was standing over this. I was down to field house watching a basketball game, and I heard some guys say, "Well, Coach Ward's offense it's outdated. It just won't work anymore." And I just walked over and I said, I hate to hear that. And they said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because that's what I run." I said, "I run the same offense Coach Ward did." And of course, I was fortunate. I told him, I said, "Guys, I don't care what you're doing. If you run the wing tee properly, like Coach Ward ran it, Coach Ward will win just as many games right now as he did then. It's just it's a matter of understanding what your capabilities are." And he knew exactly what he was doing. And luckily, I picked up on most of what he was doing, so the wing tee worked well for me.
So you used it through, I guess, a good part of all your career there at Coal Grove?
I used it through my whole career. I did it. Was there variations? Sure, but what people didn't realize, that all the things that Coach Ward did. He ran unbalanced line. He ran overload backfield. I mean, he did so many things out of the wing tee that people they had no idea what he was doing. Well, I understood what he was doing, because he was manipulating the line. He wasn't worried about those people back there. He was going to put these people up here. And if you win the line of scrimmage, you're going to win most games.
David, since you're retired as a coach, do you still continue to follow high school football?
I've never left football. I watch every game that Jay plays. Of course, I have trouble moving around now, but every game he plays, I watch it and break it down, and let him know what I think. And the one thing I told him, I said, "I want you to remember something. You're the head coach, not me. So what I say is just an aid. It's not the decision. You make the decision." And he's kind of fell into that, and he'll listen to everything I say. Sometimes he uses it, and sometimes he don't, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, well, that's true. But it's and you mentioned a while ago. I think you're so fortunate to have been able to spend that much time with your son as an adult that most of us don't get to do with our children.
That's absolutely the truth, because I think had I not been able to coach with him, I would have never viewed him as an adult.
Yeah.
But putting him in an adult situation, making adult decisions, you get to see a different side of your kid. And I was very fortunate, because I wouldn't have never known my son and who he was until I had a chance to find out, when he's an adult, what do you think?
Yeah.
And his thought patterns were solid. And that's what I told him. I said, "What you're doing is the right thing." And ethically, morally, I hope he picked up some of the things that we did.
Yeah. Dave, you've obviously spent a lifetime around coaches and around the game. And those of us who played for Coach Ward and Coach Craycraft obviously hold them in high regard. Have you been around anyone that you would have rather played for in high school than what we had the benefit of here at CK?
No, I don't think there's anybody that would have been more of an influence on me in a positive manner than Coach Ward and Coach Craycraft. They set the moral standards. They set the philosophy of teaching kids the right way of doing things, and that was important to me. And I told Coach Mayo one year, I went over there and when I talked to him, I said, when he passed away, I told his son, Brent, I said, Coach Mayo, I said, I knew football when I came here, but I did not know how to handle kids.
Yeah.
Jim Mayo taught me how to handle kids. He taught me he took kids to church with him on Sunday, did all the right things. And when I observed that, I thought, there's a lot more to this than football.
Yeah.
When you stop and you start thinking about all the things that you do that kids see. And Coach Ward and Coach Craycraft, that was the example they set for us. That I think it stayed with most of us the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
The standards that they set, morally and ethically, was something that never left us. Is still with us today.
Yeah, Dave, before we finish this episode, you also played basketball at CK.
I was very fortunate.
And,
I was a good enough athlete and I could do most things
yeah.
in high school. It was a fun time. I played with some really, really good players. Again, a lot of them were the same kids that we played, but then there were some kids that didn't play football that I was fortunate enough to get to play with. Our point guard, Skip Looney, was a really, really good basketball player. I remember Skip scoring over 50 points in one game without a three-point line.
Yeah. That's hard to
That's
fathom.
quite an accomplishment when you stop and you think about it. And but we had had Herbie Stevens was our other guard. Of course, Herbie was one of those guys that never stopped. He was like the bunny that just keeps going. And he would never stop. And Dave Spangler was the guy that played under the basket with me, and I think Dave was probably 5'9", 5'10", and I was the tallest man on the team, and I was 6 foot, 6'1", and I jumped center, and Whitey Knoll was the other guard. Whitey was the shooter. Funny story about Whitey. We were playing the game, and we had 98 points, and Coach Craycraft called timeout and said, "Now I don't want to score. I don't want to score anymore. So I don't want any more shots." And came down. They threw the ball to Whitey, bang! He shot it and scored. And Coach Craycraft threw his hands up. That was his famous, "What are you doing?" And he asked Whitey. He said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Coach, I was wide open."
I'm glad you brought Whitey up. We've during our episodes on football, his name hasn't been mentioned much, but Whitey was a pretty decent running back.
Whitey was an excellent running back. He was not very big, but man, he was tough. I mean, you knew if you were through a block that he wasn't going to go down, and if you could keep him off of him, he'd score.
Yeah.
He was probably the most aggressive running back we had the whole time I played, and he was a tough kid.
Well, in retrospect, David, is there anywhere you would have rather grown up than in Cerrito?
No. I always thought maybe I might want to move. And I got my master's. I went down to Daphne, Alabama, to the United States Sports Academy 2 summers. I was down there for 6 weeks, twice. And the second time I went down, I told my wife, I said, "I want to go home." And I said, "I don't want to live anywhere else."
Yeah.
So made her mind up. So we bought a little house over here on 1st Street West and been there ever since.
Great.
Don't want to live anywhere else.
That's the way we want to keep Cerrito.
That's right.
Well, David, we appreciate you coming in today and sharing your memories about Cerrito Canova and Cerrito Canova football in particular. And, obviously as a lifelong friend, and you're certainly one of my heroes growing up, just enough older than me that I wanted to be like David Lucas. And I appreciate the guidance you've given me and many others here in Cerrito and Canova during your high school days and thereafter.
Yeah.
And so with that, we'll end this episode of Wondering About Cerrito Canova. And David, thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm glad to be here, Paul.